Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the best top laners right now for patch 6.24 as well for patch 7.1. I'm not completely sure when 7.1 comes out, but for top lane, it doesn't look like there's too many champions getting changed. Patch 7.1, it's not a very big patch at all, so from 6.24 to 7.1, things aren't really going to change a whole lot, so this video is going to be relevant for both patches. With that being said, let's get started. So first up here, we're going to take a look at the tier 1 champions, and then after that we'll take a look at the tier 2 champions. These champions are really in no specific order. They're all really strong picks, and if you can play any of them really well, then I would definitely recommend picking them up for this patch. So first up here in the tier 1 is going to be Camille. So Camille is a really strong top laner. She just got released, and usually when a champion just gets released, they're either like really crappy or really good. I feel like there's never a champion released where they're balanced right off the start, or there's very few champions that are balanced right off the start. For example, like with Ivern, when he got released, he was complete trash. He was just getting dumpstered by a lot of the meta junglers, and now he's like one of the top tier picks now. And for Camille, I think she's probably one of the best top laners right now if you know how to play her correctly. She is banned quite a lot though, so you're not really going to be able to get her every single game. So I would definitely have like other champions in your top lane champion pool besides Camille, but if you can get your hands on her and you can play her pretty well, then I would definitely recommend playing her in this patch. Her wall hop into her stun is kind of broken in my opinion. It's just really easy to abuse that and to do really well if you get ahead with Camille in the laning phase. If you do end up getting first blood or your jungler ganks and you can get a kill, then the enemies are going to have to play so passive and so far back, and it's just very easy to zone the enemies with Camille due to her E. She also does have great mobility with her E, and she's really good at isolating carries in a team fight with her ultimate. And overall, her kit is just really strong. When you think about it, she's got a stun, she's got a slow, she's got mobility, and she's also got a way to like lock down the enemy high priority target. So her kit is just really, I don't want to say overloaded, but it's definitely a very strong kit. So for when you should not pick Camille, I would definitely look to pick her if she is open right now and you do know what you're doing on the champion. But if you want to pick her in the most ideal situation, it's always good to pick her with a champion that does have some sort of good follow-up damage or follow-up engage, because with Camille, a lot of the times you will like dive into a team fight and like get into the back line, but because you can get there so quickly, your team won't be able to follow up very fast a lot of the time. So it's always good to have someone like a Ziggs or a Vel'Koz or Leona, or someone that does have long range to help you with your engage. Next up is going to be Kale. So I feel like Kale is really underrated right now. She's pretty much always been an underrated top laner, but right now with Fervor getting buffed in 6.24 as well as Rageblade getting a buff, I think it was either 6.24 or 6.23, it just makes her an even stronger pick right now. Her ultimate is just really strong right now too against assassins. I feel like I see a Katarina in almost every single game right now, so Kale is a great pick if the enemy team does have like a Katarina, a Zed, a Rengar, because their damage and their ability to assassinate is basically completely nullified because of Kale's ultimate. She does have a really good laning phase too. There aren't really any champions in the top lane that can bully her out of lane or that can hard counter her. Her mid to late game is extremely strong too. Once you get your 3 items on Kale, or once you do get Nashers and your Rageblade, and then maybe one more item after that, you get a really good power spike and you just start to deal so much damage. And she is also a fairly easy top lane champion to play. For the most part, she is just a right click champion. The only thing that I'd say that takes a little bit of skill on Kale, or that takes a little bit of time to get used to, is being able to use your ultimate on the correct teammates and in the correct situations during a team fight. And then for when you should not pick Kale, I would try to avoid Pantheon and Jace. I did say earlier that Kale doesn't have a lot of counters, but Pantheon and Jace, they can do a fairly good job at shutting Kale down in the early game. You can still do well in those matchups as Kale, and you still will be able to farm pretty well, but if you don't play it correctly and you just end up getting poked down by Pantheon and Jace, then you can get bursted down really easily if they do end up going aggressive. I wouldn't pick her also if you're lacking tank or you're lacking engage, because Kale definitely does not provide that, but I would also pick her against enemy assassins. Even if they only have like one assassin champion, then she's a great pick in that situation. Next up is going to be Poppy. So right now, Poppy is just a pretty low risk, high reward top lane champion in my opinion. You don't even have to win lane as Poppy, and you can still be useful because of how tanky you get, like with your W and just with the tank stats that you'll be getting. And also you do provide really good crowd control with your E and your ultimate, as well as the slow from your Q. Right now, Courage along with your passive just allows you to out trade really easily in the laning phase. It's so annoying to play against Poppy in lane because you feel like it's a good situation to go in for a trade and you think you're going to win it, but then she just ends up getting her passive on a low health minion. She goes in with her E, gets the Courage proc, and she just destroys you in a trade. So it's just very hard to play against her in the laning phase, especially if you are playing like a melee champion. She is also extremely tanky with her W, and then you don't even have to build any damage on Poppy, and because of just her base stats and how much damage her Q does and her E does, she can actually like melt a squishy target to below half HP, like with an EQ auto combo. For when you should not pick Poppy, look to pick her against Yasuo, Gnar, and Irelia. She can do a really good job at countering those champions come mid to late game because of the disengage she does have with her ultimate. She can also knock these champions away from her carries with her E, and then as well, if Yasuo and Irelia, they try to dive in on your backline, you can pop your W, and if they do use their gap close ability, then they'll be stopped in their tracks and they won't be able to get onto your AD carry. I would try to avoid Kale, Darius, and Swain though. These champions can do really well against you in the laning phase, but with Poppy, you don't really have to do super well in the laning phase to be useful. So like if you can try to avoid these matchups, but if the enemy team does like end up picking one of these champions, it's definitely not the end of the world. And then also look to pick her if you are lacking a tank, because Poppy is probably one of the best tank champions you can play this patch. So next up is going to be Nautilus. Right now, I think that Nautilus is very similar to Poppy, so I'm not going to go into too much detail as to why I have him in tier 1. I do think he is a little bit better than Poppy though. He's a bit better version of Poppy in my opinion. He does do really well with Courage. He's also a massive CC tank. You also don't need to do very well in the laning phase to be successful on him, but the reasons I think he's better than Poppy are because he does provide good pick potential with his Q and his ultimate, and you do have a little bit more carry potential on Nautilus in my opinion, because you can end up isolating that fed carry, or you can just get onto that fed carry in a team fight a lot easier with your Q and your ultimate. You are also really good at setting up ganks too with Nautilus. It's very easy for you to pick up that first blood in the early game just because of the amount of crowd control you do have at level 2. So when you are playing top lane Nautilus, look to call your jungler over for an early gank, because chances are you will pick up that first blood. And then if you do end up getting ahead with Nautilus, the game's pretty much over, because you can just group with your team. If you do find the enemy caught out, it's very easy to tower dive as Nautilus, and it's just very easy for you to engage on that priority champion. Now when should you not pick Nautilus? So I would try to avoid Kale, Swain, and Darius. Darius especially, because Darius can do a really good job against champions that need to get up close to deal damage, and because Nautilus does need to get like right up close to Darius, it will allow him to get those auto attacks off on the Nautilus and stack up his passive, and then once Darius does hit level 6, it's going to be very easy for him to all in you and just get that true damage off with his ultimate. I would look to pick him though if you are lacking engage or you are lacking that good tank champion. And to round out the tier 1 champions for this patch is going to be Jace. So Jace is really good right now in this meta. With the first blood towers, it just makes it very easy for him to get that 650 gold. He's probably one of the best laning top laners right now. It's so hard to play against Jace because he's just going to constantly poke you down, and his all-in combo is super strong as well. So if you do try to go in for that extra CS or that last CS, he could just all-in you and burst you down, and a lot of the times you're not going to expect how much damage he can actually do. He's also really strong if you do get ahead with him. I think right now he's got one of the best, if not the best, win rates if you do end a game before 25 minutes, just because his early game is so strong. And if you do get ahead with Jace, you can just look to go mid, you can go bot, and you can shred towers really quickly because of your W. If you do get that first blood tower, I would not recommend just sitting top lane and continuing to split push with him. Group with your team, especially if they are not doing so well, because it's very easy for you to siege with Jace with your QE combo and with your W damage on those towers. And then for when you should not pick Jace, try to avoid Malphite, Yasuo, and Braum if you can. And then also don't pick him if you are lacking engage or if you're lacking good team fight. So for example, if you got someone like an Ivern in the jungle and then a Saraga or Janna support, then don't pick Jace there. I would pick someone like a Nautilus or a Poppy, because come mid to late game, that team comp is just gonna have no engage and no way of really starting a fight. And then if we take a look at the tier 2 champions now, there are quite a few champions that I've put in the tier 2 for this patch, mainly because I think that there are a lot of different top laners right now that can carry pretty well if you can play them correctly. So these champions are going to be Darius, Riven, Renekton, Aurelia, Maokai, Swain, Sion, and Pantheon. So I usually don't put Darius on my list for top lane because I just feel like there's always a better top lane champion than Darius, because he can get kited really easily and he just doesn't have the ability to carry as hard come mid to late game, especially if the enemy team does have someone like a Janna who is very meta right now. But in the top lane, we are seeing a lot of tankier top laners being played, these like melee type tanky top laners like Nautilus and Poppy, and in those situations Darius can actually do pretty well, because if they try to do damage to him, that's what Darius wants. He wants the enemies to come close to him so he can get those autos off, so he can get his passive stacking, and then he'll be able to get that true damage off with his ultimate. So in those situations where you can go against melee top laners, I would pick him, but you just kind of got to judge like the situation. If the enemy team does have a lot of disengage and it's going to be very hard for you to get onto that back line in a team fight, then in that situation I probably wouldn't end up picking him. For Renekton, I think right now with Courage of the Colossus, Renekton is actually a really strong bully top laner. So a lot of the top laners, they can't out trade Renekton in the early game, and it just allows him to really easily pick up first blood if he does play it correctly. I would recommend taking Ignite if you are playing Renekton. You want to have a really good early game on this champion, and his early game is definitely one of the best. So getting that first blood is really crucial with Renekton. He's not the best champion come mid to late game. His team fighting definitely gets outclassed by someone like a Poppy or Nautilus, so it is very important to just go aggressive in the early game as Renekton and try to get that first blood, because if you do, you can definitely carry very hard with him. And then for Maokai right now, Maokai is also another good champion due to Courage of the Colossus. The reason I have him tier 2 though instead of tier 1 is because I just think that Poppy and Nautilus do his job a little bit better. With Maokai, you don't really have that reliable engageability or that way to just like easily get onto the back line unless you do go for a flash W, whereas with Nautilus and Poppy, it's a lot easier for you to lock down the enemy AD carry in a team fight and you're not as reliant on that flash. So that's why he is tier 2 and not tier 1, but he definitely is still a really good tank champion, and he does provide great disengage against the assassins that are being played right now. So that is going to be all for this video, guys. As always, if you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have not already. So thanks for watching, guys. Have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.